The heavy thud of the sedan's door sealing shut cut off the city noise instantly. It was like going underwater. I didn't give her a destination. I just looked at the back of her head and said, "Just drive." In my world, clarity is currency. You don't give vague orders. But Yancy didn't turn around. She just held my gaze in the rearview mirror for a beat longer than protocol allowed. Her eyes were dark, unreadable, and completely calm. It wasn't a refusal. It was an offer. The engine hummed to life, a low vibration traveling up through the leather seats. For the first time, the terrifying thrill wasn't about the deal, but the woman steering my life.
You have to understand the noise to understand why her silence mattered. My life is a constant, deafening frequency of demands. From the moment the elevator opens in the penthouse to the second the security system arms at night, I am a commodity. People don't look at me. They look at what I can sign, authorize, or wire. I live in a glass cage of performance. If I stop moving, the whole structure collapses. That's why I hired Yancy. The interview process for a personal driver is usually a formality, but she made it feel like an interrogation of my needs. She didn't try to charm me. She didn't smile with that desperate, ingratiating eagerness I see in everyone else who wants proximity to power. She stood with a military sort of posture, spine like a steel rod, hands clasped loosely but ready. She wore the uniform better than the previous 3 drivers combined. The black suit wasn't a costume on her, it was tactical gear. She was sharp, efficient, and occupied space with a deliberate gravity. When I asked if she understood the non-disclosure agreement, she didn't even look at the paperwork. She looked right at me, unflinching, and said, "I know how to keep a secret, ma'am." It sounded less like a compliance statement and more like a vow. The first week was a study in controlled variables. My previous drivers were chatty, trying to network from the front seat, pitching me ideas while I was trying to review quarterly reports. Yancy was a ghost. She anticipated the climate control needs before I could reach for the dial. She knew my coffee order, black, no sugar, temperature specific, without me ever writing it down. But it was the mirror that became our primary point of contact. I started catching her watching me. Not the leering looks I'm used to from men in boardrooms, but a steady, protective sweep. She checked the traffic, checked the mirrors, checked me. It became a rhythm, a cadence. I'd look up from a disastrous email chain, and there were her eyes, framed in that rectangular strip of glass, assessing my stress levels. The moment our gazes locked, she'd shift focus back to the road, smooth and professional. But the charge remained. The air between the front and back seats began to feel pressurized, like a storm front moving in. In my tax bracket, you assume silence is something you purchase. You pay for the NDAs, the privacy screens, the soundproofing. But with Yancy, the quiet felt voluntary. She wasn't silent because she was paid to be invisible. She was silent because she was listening. She was offering a space where I didn't have to perform. It was a rare, dangerous luxury. I found myself delaying my exit just to stay in that controlled environment a few seconds longer, breathing in the scent of cedar and conditioned leather that seemed to cling to her. I watched her hands on the wheel, gripping at 10 and 2, veins prominent against the back of her hands, capable and steady. Then came the Tuesday that nearly broke me. The quarterly review with the board. It was a bloodbath, disguised as a strategic realignment. They questioned my leadership, my focus, my emotional capacity to handle the merger. I sat there for 4 hours, armor on, smiling while they dismantled my confidence piece by piece. When I finally walked out of the building, it was raining. Hard, cold, miserable rain that soaked through my coat in seconds. I felt hollowed out, destroyed. I needed to go home, but the thought of that empty, silent penthouse felt like a sentence. I needed something else. I needed the only place where the noise stopped. It was 2:14 a.m. when I finally pushed through the revolving doors. The security guard at the desk looked startled, like seeing a statue come to life and walk off its pedestal. My phone was finally silent,
The battery drained into the red, much like my own internal reserves. I felt brittle. One wrong tap and I would shatter right there on the wet pavement.
Yancy was there. Of course she was. The car was idling at the curb, a dark, sleek beast purring in the rain. She was standing outside, holding the umbrella, unbothered by the downpour. She opened the door before I reached it, shielding me from the elements with a practiced, fluid motion. I slid into the back seat, and the heavy door thunked shut, sealing me in. The silence was immediate. It was physical. Usually I would say, "Home, Yancy," or "the airport." But tonight, the thought of my penthouse made my chest tight. I couldn't go back there. Not yet. I couldn't face the emptiness that waited for me. The reflection of a woman who had just spent 4 hours justifying her existence to a table of old men. "Don't take me home," I said. My voice sounded wrecked, raspy from hours of arguing. I looked up, catching her eyes in the mirror. "Just drive, please. Anywhere but there." A lesser driver would have asked for clarification. They would have asked for a quadrant, a duration, a destination. Yancy didn't blink. She gave a single, sharp nod, a micro gesture of understanding. "Understood," she said. Her voice was low, a dark alto that seemed to vibrate through the upholstery. She put the car in gear, and we moved. She didn't head toward the highway or the residential district. She turned toward the river, slipping the sedan into the veins of the city. At 2 a.m., the city sheds its skin. The frantic, transactional energy of the day dissolves into something moodier, stranger. The streetlights smeared into long ribbons of amber and sodium orange against the rain-streaked windows. The rhythm of the windshield wipers became a hypnotic metronome. Swish, pause. Swish, pause. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes. I could feel the car taking the corners, smooth, deliberate turns. Yancy drove with a kind of reverence, like she was carrying something fragile. Maybe she was. For the first 20 minutes, I said nothing. I just let the motion soothe the raw edges of my nerves. But the silence, usually my favorite part of the ride, started to feel heavy with everything I hadn't said upstairs. The anger I had swallowed during the meeting began to rise, choking me. I needed to let it out, or I was going to scream. "They think I'm too emotional," I said to the ceiling of the car. The words just fell out. That was the feedback. Too invested in the human capital. As if caring about the people who work for you is a liability. I paused, waiting for the professional deflection. A polite, "I'm sure they don't mean it, ma'am." But Yancy said nothing. She kept her eyes on the road, her profile silhouetted against the passing streetlights. She was listening. I could feel the intensity of her attention. It wasn't passive, it was active. She was holding the space open for me. So I kept going. I told her about the merger. I told her about the betrayal of the CFO, a man I had mentored for 5 years. I told her about the exhaustion that felt like it had settled into the marrow of my bones. I spoke to the back of her head, to the dark partition, to the city sliding by outside. I stripped away the polished CEO cadence and just spoke as a tired woman who was sick of fighting. We drove for an hour, maybe 2. We looped through the industrial district, where the shadows were long and deep, and up along the ridge, where the city looked like a circuit board of glittering lights below us. "I don't know why I'm doing this anymore," I whispered, the confession hanging in the air. "I have everything, and I have nothing." Yancy slowed the car as we approached a red light. The cabin was quiet again, but the texture of the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with my truth. And she hadn't flinched. She hadn't tried to fix it. She hadn't offered empty platitudes. She had just driven. She looked in the mirror then. Her gaze was steady. "You're steering the ship through a storm, ma'am," she said softly. "Sometimes you just need to let someone else watch the radar for a while." It was a simple metaphor, professional on the surface, but the subtext hit me in the chest. She wasn't just driving the car. She was telling me she had me. That for this hour, in this leather-bound capsule, I didn't have to be the captain. I could just be. That was the night the car stopped being just a mode of transport. It became a confessional, a decompression chamber. And Yancy stopped being just an employee. She became the keeper of my secrets, the one person who saw the cracks in the armor and didn't look away. Weeks split into months, and the drives ceased to be mere transit. They became the only appointments on my calendar, written in permanent ink. I found myself dismissing my assistant early, manufacturing reasons to leave the office at odd hours, just to slide into the back seat of that sedan. The moments of transfer became high-stakes negotiations. Morning coffee, the tablet with the daily briefing. Simple objects that required us to breach the invisible wall between us. One morning, she handed me a steaming cup of dark roast. The car hit a small bump just as I reached for it. Our fingers brushed. It wasn't a grab, just a graze, her skin rougher than mine, warm and dry. The contact lasted maybe half a second, but the shock of it traveled straight up my arm and settled in my chest, knocking the breath out of me. I almost dropped the cup. She didn't pull away. She let her hand linger, her eyes locking with mine in the mirror. "Careful, ma'am," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "It's hot." I didn't know if she was talking about the coffee. We started talking more. I asked her once, during a long idle at a red light, if she ever got bored driving in circles while I lived in meetings. She adjusted her grip on the wheel. "There's a difference between driving and steering, ma'am," she said, meeting my eyes in the glass. "Steering is just keeping the car in the lane, reacting. Driving is anticipating the road, knowing the destination before you turn the key. It's about control." She paused. "Most people are just steering. They think they're in control because they're holding the wheel, but they're just reacting. I prefer to drive." It hit me then. I was the CEO, allegedly in charge, but I had been steering for years, reacting to the board, the market, the endless expectations of people who didn't know me. Yancy was the only one actually driving. The realization hung between us, heavy and undeniable. Then the sky turned a bruised purple. The first drops of rain hit the windshield like bullets, announcing a storm that was about to change everything. The storm didn't just break, it collapsed on top of the city. It was a torrential, biblical downpour that turned the avenues into rushing rivers and the skyline into a blurred watercolor of gray and steel. We were on the expressway when the world simply stopped. A gridlock of epic proportions seized the highway, thousands of red taillights bleeding into the wet asphalt ahead of us, a sea of paralyzed machinery. We were trapped. And for the first time in my life, being trapped didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a reprieve. The car became a private island. The rain hammered against the roof and the glass, a relentless, rhythmic drumming that drowned out everything else. The wipers slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the deluge, until Yancy reached out and silenced them. Then, she reached for the ignition and killed the engine. The sudden death of the mechanical hum was shocking. Without the engine's vibration masking it, I could suddenly feel the reality of our proximity. I could hear the shift of fabric as she settled deeper into her seat. I could hear the slow, steady intake of her breath. The partition was open. It always was now. And the air between us began to thicken, charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with the storm outside. We sat like that for a long time, just listening to the rain try to find a way in. The temperature in the car began to drop, the windows fogging up from the heat of our bodies, turning the outside world into nothing but a gray abstraction. We were nowhere. We were timeless. "Yancy," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the sudden quiet, stripping away the professional distance I usually maintained. "Ma'am?" She didn't turn around, but I saw her eyes find mine in the rearview mirror. In the dim light of the dashboard, her gaze was dark and unreadable. "What do you do?" I asked, the question feeling like a transgression. When you're not driving me, when you're not this.
It was a breach of protocol. I knew it. You don't ask the staff about their lives. It blurs the lines. It creates complications.
But the rain had washed away the lines. She was quiet for a moment, her hands resting loosely on the bottom of the steering wheel.
I exist, she said finally. Her voice was low, a rich timbre that seemed to vibrate through the small space, resonating in my own chest. I read, I run. I wait for the next shift.
You wait? I like the structure, she said, her eyes never leaving mine in the reflection. I like knowing where I need to be. It's the variables I don't like. People are variables. This car. This is a constant.
I hate it, I whispered. The confession clawed its way out of my throat before I could stop it. I hate going home. I hate the penthouse. It's just a museum of things I bought to impress people I don't like. It's cold. And it's empty.
I watched her reaction in the mirror. She didn't look surprised. She didn't offer pity. She just held my gaze, stripping me down to the bone.
I know, she said. The certainty in her tone made me shiver.
How do you know? She turned then. For the first time in the car, she fully turned in the driver's seat, angling her body so she could look back at me through the gap in the seats. The movement was deliberate, breaking the rigid geometry of our arrangement.
Because I see you in the mirror when we pull up to the curb, Yancy said. Her voice was softer now, rougher. I see the way your shoulders drop. I see the light go out of your eyes the second you look at that building. You look like someone walking to the gallows. My breath hitched. I hadn't realized I was so transparent. I hadn't realized she was watching that closely.
I hate dropping you off, she added, the words hanging in the air like smoke. The drive is the only time you look real. The second you step out of this car, you put the mask back on. I hate watching you disappear behind it.
The admission hit me harder than the storm outside. She wasn't just driving me. She was witnessing me. In a world where everyone wanted a piece of the CEO, she was the only one mourning the woman underneath.
Ahead of us, the sea of red lights flickered. Engines started to turn over. The gridlock was breaking. The world was restarting. But as Yancy turned back to the wheel and the engine purred to life, I knew the barrier between us was gone. We weren't just driver and passenger anymore. We were conspirators in a silent war against the loneliness waiting for us at the end of the road.
The Foundation Gala is where you go to be a sculpture.
I wore a midnight blue silk column that cost more than a sedan and felt like a straitjacket. My neck ached under borrowed diamonds. I stood in the center of the ballroom, a fixed point in a swirling galaxy of ambition, smiling until my face spasmed. Every hand that touched my arm wanted a donation, a job, or a piece of my reputation. I felt like I was being slowly cannibalized. By 10 p.m., the noise was a physical weight pressing my temples. I couldn't breathe. I didn't signal my assistant. I just turned and fled toward the exit.
I pushed into the night. It was raining, a cold, relentless drizzle that slicked the pavement. The air was sharp, scrubbing the scent of lilies and desperation from my lungs. I scanned the line of black town cars, a fleet of sharks waiting for their masters. Panic flared. What if she wasn't there?
Then I saw her. Yancy wasn't in the car. She stood on the curb, a dark silhouette against the gray wash, holding a large black umbrella with that military stillness that made her impossible to ignore. She saw me instantly. She didn't wave. She just moved. She cut through the crowd of valets with fluid grace, closing the distance in seconds. She stopped in front of me and raised the umbrella, creating a sudden, dry canopy. The world shrank to a 3-foot circle of pavement and the sound of rain drumming on nylon.
Rough night, ma'am? Her voice was low, cutting under the street noise. Get me out of here, I breathed, voice shaking. Please.
She nodded, but didn't move to open the door. Instead, she shifted closer. The umbrella wasn't large enough for professional distance. To keep me dry, she had to stand inside my personal space.
I felt the heat radiating from her body, a solid wall of warmth against the chill. She smelled of rain and that faint, woodsy cedar scent. I looked up. She was looking down, her gaze traveling over the diamonds, the gown, the mask. She didn't look impressed. She looked angry. Not at me, but for me. "You're shivering," she observed quietly, her eyes tracking the tremor in my hands. "It's cold." "It's not the cold," she corrected. A camera flash went off, then another. The paparazzi had spotted the exit. "Over here! Who are you wearing?" The shouts were jagged shards. I flinched, stepping back, but there was nowhere to go. Yancy moved instantly. She didn't just hold the umbrella. She became a shield. She stepped between me and the cameras, blocking their view, pressing me back against the wet metal of the car. Her body hovered inches from mine, shielding me, hiding me. It was a protective gesture, professional on paper, but the energy was possessive, primal. For a suspended second, we were chest to chest. I saw individual raindrops caught in her eyelashes. I saw the pulse beating in the hollow of her throat. My breath caught. The noise faded into a dull roar. All I was aware of was her, the way she loomed over me, encompassing. "Let them flash," she murmured, her voice a rumble I felt in my ribs. "They can't see you. I've got you. I've got you." The words unspooled something tight in my chest. I had spent 20 years being the one who had everyone else. No one had ever had me. "Yancy," I whispered, the name feeling like a prayer on my tongue, but she was already shifting, her hand finding the handle behind me. She pulled the door open without stepping back, creating a seamless tunnel from the shelter of her body into the shelter of the car. "Inside," she commanded softly. I slid into the leather seat, trembling. She slammed the door, cutting off the flashes, the shouting, the rain. A moment later, she was in the driver's seat. The locks engaged with a heavy, definitive thud. The engine roared, not a purr, but a growl. She pulled away aggressively, forcing a taxi to brake, carving a path out of the chaos. I looked in the mirror. Her eyes were hard, fixed on the road, jaw set. She drove like we were fleeing a crime scene. And maybe we were. We were stealing back the part of me the world tried to eat alive. I sank into the leather, watching the gala disappear, feeling safe, seen, and terrifyingly alive. The fallout was immediate and surgical. By morning, the photo of us under that umbrella was circulating on the industry blogs. It wasn't captioned as a security extraction. It was framed as a moment of intimacy. The Iron Lady and her shadow. The grainy image showed Yancy's body curved over mine, protective and encompassing, and my hand clutching the lapel of her jacket. It didn't look like an executive and a driver. It looked like a secret being kept in plain sight. The board called an emergency session before I'd even finished my first coffee. They didn't scream. They whispered. That's how you know you're in trouble. The chairman sat at the head of the mahogany table, sliding a tablet across the polished surface like he was dealing a playing card. "We have concerns about your focus," he said, his voice smooth and detached. "And your private movements." "It was a security measure," I said, my voice tight. "The press was aggressive." "It looks like favoritism," he countered. "It looks like instability. The shareholders need to know you are married to this company, not distracted by the help." He leaned back, tenting his fingers. "We advise a rotation. A new driver. A clean slate. It removes the ambiguity." When I got into the car that evening, I didn't greet her. I slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. The air inside was warm, smelling of her and the leather, but I refused to breathe it in. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through emails I wasn't reading, building a wall of digital noise between us. "The office," I snapped. "And take the tunnel. I don't want to deal with traffic." Yancy didn't move immediately. She watched me in the mirror for a second too long. "The tunnel is backed up, ma'am. The bridge is faster." "I said the tunnel," I retorted, my voice sharp, brittle. "Do I need to draw you a map? Just drive the car, Yancy. That's the job description, nothing else.
It was cruel. It was calculated. I wanted her to hate me. If she hated me, it would be easier to fire her. If she hated me, I wouldn't have to feel the crushing weight of what I was about to lose. She put the car in gear without a word. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable, companionable quiet we had built over the months. It was jagged. It was toxic. I sat rigid in the back, staring out the window at the gray blur of the city, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like I was suffocating. "They want you gone," I said suddenly, unable to hold it back. I didn't look at the mirror. "The board. They think you're a liability. And what do you think?" Her voice was calm, infuriatingly steady. "I think they're right," I lied. The words tasted like ash. "I think we've let this, whatever this is, get unprofessional. You crossed a line last night." "I protected you," Yancey said. "You made a scene." I turned on her then, anger flaring hot and desperate. "You made me look weak. You made me look like I needed saving. I don't need saving, Yancey. I need a driver who knows her place." I waited for her to apologize. I waited for her to retreat into the deference of a subordinate. That's how the script goes. I yell, they shrink, and order is restored. But Yancey didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. "Is that what you think happened?" she asked, her eyes finding mine in the glass, dark and defiant. "You think I stepped out of line? Or are you scared because for 5 seconds, you let yourself be safe?" "Watch your tone," I warned, my voice trembling. "I'm not the one lying," she shot back. "I am the CEO of this company," I shouted, the veneer finally cracking. "I tell you what the truth is." "You're shaking," she said softly. "Stop the car. We're in traffic." I said, "Stop the damn car." Yancey wrenched the wheel to the right. The sedan swerved across 2 lanes, horns blaring behind us, and surged up the exit ramp toward the overlook. She didn't slow down until we reached the gravel turnout at the top of the ridge, away from the lights, away from the eyes, away from the world. She slammed the gear shift into park and killed the engine. The silence that rushed back in was absolute, heavy with the violence of our words. We were alone in the dark. The city spread out below us like a glittering, indifferent monster. My chest was heaving. I was furious, terrified, and completely undone. I had tried to fire her, and instead, she had driven me to the edge of the world. The silence in the parked car was different this time. It wasn't the sanctuary I had come to crave. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the air until my lungs burned. The only sound was the rhythmic tick, tick, tick of the cooling engine and the distant, muted hum of the city below us. We were suspended on the edge of the cliff, the darkness pressing against the windows like a physical weight. "You can't just hijack the car," I whispered, my voice lacking the command I tried to force into it. I sounded small. I felt small. "This is kidnapping. Or insubordination. I could have you arrested." "You could," Yancey said. She didn't sound worried. She sounded resigned. "But you won't." "You don't understand the stakes," I argued, leaning forward, my hands gripping the leather of the front seat. I needed her to understand the logic, the cold, hard math of my existence. It's not just a job. It's the stock price. It's the perception of stability. If they think I'm compromised, if they think I'm being influenced by you, the whole architecture falls down. NDAs can cover trade secrets, Yancey. They can't cover feelings. They can't redact the way I look at you. The admission hung there, raw and terrifying. I had never said it out loud. I had never admitted that I was the one looking. Yancey moved then. She didn't open the door. She didn't start the engine. Instead, she unbuckled her seatbelt. The metallic click echoed like a gunshot, and shifted her entire body. She turned in the driver's seat, maneuvering her legs over the center console, breaking the rigid, forward-facing geometry that had defined our relationship for months. For the first time, there was no partition, no rearview mirror, no reflection to hide behind. She was facing me directly, flesh and blood, illuminated only by the faint amber glow of the dashboard lights. The physical barrier was gone. The distance between her face and mine was less than 2 feet. I could see the tension in her jaw, the dark, unyielding depth of her eyes. I instinctively pressed my back into the seat, overwhelmed by the sudden direct exposure. "Forget the stock price," Yancey said, her voice low and rough, stripping away the professional polish. "Forget the board. Look at me. What is actually at stake here? Is it your reputation? Or is it the fact that for the first time in 10 years, you're actually feeling something?" "I can't afford to feel," I snapped, tears stinging my eyes. "Feelings are variables. Variables cause errors, and loneliness is a constant," she countered. "Is that the math you want? You want to go back to that penthouse, pour a drink, and talk to the walls? You want to spend the next 20 years being a portrait of success that nobody is allowed to touch?" "I have to protect the company," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "Then fire me," she said. The words were simple, but they hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs.
"If that's what saves you," Yancey continued,
her voice dropping to a hush that was louder than a scream, "then do it. I will have my resignation on your desk by 8 a.m. I will sign whatever you want. I will disappear. You can hire a robot who drives in silence and never looks back. You can have your clean slate." She leaned closer, resting her arm on the back of her seat, bridging the gap between the front and back. "I can give you that silence. The empty kind. The kind that echoes." I couldn't breathe. The thought of the car without her, just a machine moving through space, made me feel sick. "Or?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Or," Yancey said, her gaze dropping to my lips before returning to my eyes, "you stop pretending that this silence is empty. You admit that the reason you get in this car isn't to go somewhere, but to be with someone. I can offer you my silence, but not the kind you buy, the kind you share, the kind that holds you together when the world tries to tear you apart." She held out her hand. It hovered in the air between the seats, palm up, calloused and steady. It was an invitation, a precipice. "I can't be your driver and your secret," she said. "I can only be the woman who sees you. You have to choose." The city glittered below us, a million lights representing millions of people, all running, all steering, all alone. I looked at her hand. It was the only real thing in my world. The logic of the boardroom, the safety of the glass cage, it all dissolved. Slowly, terrifyingly, I reached out. I didn't take her hand like a handshake. I placed my palm against the leather headrest, inches from her fingers. It was a hesitation, a final tremor of fear. Yancey didn't wait. She moved her hand, covering mine where it rested on the seat. Her skin was warm, electric. Her thumb brushed the pulse point of my wrist, finding the erratic, frantic rhythm of my heart. She didn't squeeze. She just anchored me. "I'm not going back to the cage," I whispered. "I know," Yancey said. "I won't let you." In the dark of the car, with the engine cold and the world locked out, the decision settled over us. It wasn't a contract. It was a surrender. And for the first time, the silence wasn't waiting to be filled. It was enough. The next morning, the elevator ride to the 42nd floor didn't feel like an ascent to the chopping block. It felt like a deployment. I wore a charcoal suit, sharp enough to cut glass, but for the first time in years, the steel in my spine was my own, not a prosthetic I strapped on for the shareholders. When I walked into the boardroom, the silence wasn't heavy. It was waiting. The chairman looked at me, expecting a resignation or a firing. He expected the clean slate he had ordered. Instead, I threw the tablet back across the mahogany table with a clatter that made the CFO jump. "The driver stays," I said. My voice didn't waver. It didn't pitch up into defense. It settled low, into command. "Security is about trust, gentlemen. I trust her with my life. Unless you have a candidate who can navigate a hostile extraction in a rainstorm while keeping the press at bay, the subject is closed." I didn't wait for their permission. I didn't offer explanations about favoritism or try to soften the blow. I framed it as a resource issue, a security protocol. I spoke their language: risk, asset protection, leverage. But the conviction underneath was entirely foreign to them. It was the conviction of a woman who finally had something worth protecting. They folded. Of course they did. Men like that only respect leverage. And for the first time, I wasn't bluffing. I was steering. But the real negotiation happened at 6:15 p.m. I walked down to the garage, the concrete echoing with the slam of car doors and the squeal of tires. Yancy was waiting in the usual spot, standing by the rear passenger door. She was rigid, her face a mask of professional neutrality, her hand resting on the handle, ready to usher me into the safe, silent dark of the backseat. I walked past her. I didn't stop at the rear door. I didn't even slow down. I kept walking, rounding the hood of the car, feeling the heat of the engine radiating against my legs. I stopped at the front passenger door. Yancy froze. Her hand fell from the back handle. She watched me across the roof of the car, her eyes wide, scanning my face for a sign of madness or mistake. "Ma'am?" she asked, the word uncertain, hanging in the exhaust-filled air. "Unlock it, Yancy," I said softly. The locks clicked, a sharp, mechanical surrender. I pulled the door open and slid into the front seat. The perspective shift was jarring. Suddenly, I wasn't the cargo. I was the co-pilot. The dashboard was a constellation of buttons and dials I had never seen up close. The seat was firmer, the angle of the windshield steeper. But the most overwhelming detail was the proximity. There was no partition, no distance. Her left arm and my right arm were separated by 6 inches of center console. I could smell the leather of her jacket, the faint, sharp scent of her soap, and the underlying warmth of her skin. She got in, the air shifting and compressing as the door closed. She didn't start the car immediately. She just looked at me, her hands gripping the wheel, knuckles pale. "This breaks every protocol in the handbook," she murmured, looking at the space between us like it was a canyon we had just jumped. "I rewrote the handbook this morning," I replied, looking at her profile, tracing the line of her jaw without the mediation of a mirror. Drive. We didn't go home. We went to a diner on the edge of the industrial district, a place with flickering neon and laminated menus that smelled of coffee and grease. No one there knew my net worth. No one cared about the merger. We positioned ourselves in a red vinyl booth, stripping away the status symbols. I put my phone away. She took off her suit jacket. "You realize this changes the job," Yancy said, tracing the rim of her mug. Her eyes were dark, serious, watching my hands. "I can't just be the help anymore, and you can't just be the boss. The lines are gone." "I don't want the lines," I admitted, leaning in until my knee brushed hers under the table. The contact was electric, grounding. "I want the mess. I want the complications. I want to know what you take in your coffee without reading a file." "Cream," she said, a small, genuine smile engaging the corner of her mouth, softening the military clear of her eyes. "2 sugars. And I hate the opera." "I hate the opera too," I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place I thought had gone dormant. "I just go for the donors." We sat there for 2 hours, mapping out the logistics of a life that didn't fit into a spreadsheet. It was terrifying. It was reckless. It was the most honest business I had ever conducted. When we finally pulled up to my building, the city was asleep. Yancy killed the engine, but neither of us moved to open the door. The silence wasn't a void anymore. It was a structure we were building together. It's been 6 months since we redefined the terms of employment. The seasons have turned, trading the brutal, isolating rain for a sharp, clear autumn that sets the trees on fire along the parkway. The sedan is still black, still polished to a mirror shine, but the atmosphere inside has shifted from a vacuum to a home. The partition is down. It stays down. I sit in the passenger seat now, a breach of protocol that would give the board palpitations if they could see us. But they don't see us. We have carved out a space that exists off the company grid, a sacred, secret routine that belongs only to the two of us. We are on the highway, leaving the city limits behind. The skyline, usually a reminder of everything I owe to the world, shrinks in the side mirror until it's just a jagged gray line. Yancey drives with one hand on the wheel, relaxed but alert. Her other hand rests on the center console, palm open. It's an invitation I accept without hesitation. I lace my fingers through hers, feeling the calluses, the strength, the warmth. It's a grounding wire. The current that flows between us is steady, a low-voltage hum that quiets the static in my head. I trace the veins on the back of her hand, mapping the anatomy of the strength that pulled me out of the flood. "You're staring," she says, not looking away from the road, a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "I'm observing," I correct, squeezing her hand. "There's a difference. And what are you observing?" "That you were right," I say softly. "About steering versus driving." She glances at me then, a quick, warm flash of eyes that makes my stomach flip, just like it did the first time I saw her in the rear view. "Yeah? I spent 20 years gripping the wheels so tight my hands cramped," I admit, looking out at the blurring trees. "I thought if I let go, even for a second, we'd crash. But I'm not steering right now, and we're doing just fine." Yancey squeezes my hand back, a firm, reassuring pressure. "You're not just a passenger, ma'am. You're the navigator. I just handle the machine." "Don't call me ma'am," I murmur, the old title feeling like a costume I've discarded. "Old habits," she teases, her thumb tracing the back of my hand. We pull off the main road, the tires crunching onto gravel. This isn't the office. It isn't the cold, glass-walled penthouse that smells of cleaning products and loneliness. It's a small A-frame we found together, tucked into the cedar and pine. A place where the cell reception dies and the air smells like wood smoke. When the car stops, the silence that settles isn't sudden. It's a continuation. Yancey kills the engine, but neither of us moves to open the door. We sit for a moment in the ticking quiet, surrounded by the woods. Yancey kills the engine, but neither of us moves to open the door. We just sit there, breathing the same air, watching the leaves drift down onto the hood. It's simple, it's quiet. And for the first time in my life, it's enough. The cabin door clicked shut behind us, leaving the world and its noise on the other side. I tossed the car keys onto the wooden table, a heavy, metallic sound that signaled the end of the journey and the start of something real. The greatest luxury I ever purchased wasn't the car or the silence. It was the courage to let someone else drive. If you've ever found love in the quiet moments, subscribe to Sapphic Legacy,